Hi, I'm Barb Nangle. I'm the founder of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole: Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. On this podcast, I share my experience, strength, and hope from recovery. I don't support or endorse any particular 12-step recovery fellowship, and I don't claim to speak for any of them either. My hope is that you will find my words helpful in some way, whether you're in recovery or not. This is episode 77, Getting Rid of Expectations After the Fact. Before I get into today's topic, I just want to share that I am super excited because last week I did my very first webinar. It was on myths and misconceptions about boundaries, and because it was my pilot webinar, I'm really excited that it went so well. I feel like I was born to do this kind of thing. And I also feel really good about the fact that a number of people responded to let me know how helpful it was. There were a couple tech things I'll do differently in the future, but other than that, I'm pretty proud of how it went. If you're interested in getting a replay and the slides from that webinar, send me an email to barb@higherpowercc.com or DM me on Instagram at Higher Power Coaching, and I'll get those to you. I'm going to be doing more free webinars in the next few weeks, probably about boundaries, especially in preparation for the holidays, because I know that people often have a hard time with boundaries around the holidays, what with family members, etc. And sometimes even before the holidays, like deciding who's going to go to whose house for dinner and who's staying at whose house and who's staying at a hotel and who's hosting and who's not. And then there's the actual holidays where we want people to stop asking us personal questions like, are you dating anyone? What happened to all that weight you lost? How come you don't have a job yet? You can't actually make people stop asking you such questions, but you can put up boundaries to discourage them from asking you such questions. And I know that I can help with that. So stay tuned and I'll say more about that. I am really excited to be stepping into the world of webinars, etc. And I feel like I was born to do that kind of work. I feel so blessed to have the ability to articulate what I've learned from overcoming my pain and my dysfunctional patterns in such a way that it helps other people. Also, I want to take another moment to please ask you to review my podcast. I know there are some podcast platforms that don't accept reviews, but if you use an app that does accept reviews and you've gotten even one piece of wisdom from this podcast that has helped you in some way, please let me know and let other people know. So hopefully they can get the help and healing you've gotten too. I was just talking to somebody the other day who told me that they have been using the phrase, bless them, change me, over and over and over again, which they learned from my podcast, and it has revolutionized things for them. I wouldn't have known they had that experience if the person had not told me directly. So I'd love to see your reviews, and it also helps other people find the podcast. All right, let's get into the topic of getting rid of expectations after the fact. I knew before I even got into recovery that expectations are premeditated resentments. I just had no fucking idea how to not have expectations. I've gotten a lot better about not having expectations, not being attached to outcomes. And in fact, I do have an episode about overcoming unrealistic expectations. It's number 31. However, I still sometimes find that I have expectations, but I only realize that I had an expectation when the expectation doesn't get met. That is, I didn't even know I had an expectation. Then I get upset and I examine why I'm upset, and I'll realize, oh, I had an expectation that was so subconscious that I wasn't even aware of it until it didn't get met. Now, as soon as I see that I had an expectation, I unhook from that expectation. At least that's what I call it. I retroactively let go of that expectation. I look at this situation and I think to myself, oh, okay, I had an expectation. For example, I said, I love you to someone a while ago and they didn't say it back. I got upset by that, and I realized when I said that I had an expectation of that person saying, I love you back to me. But the only way I realized I had that expectation is I felt a little wounded when they didn't say, I love you back to me. And then I thought, what was that wounding about? And it was about me having an expectation of them saying, I love you back to me. And then I thought, well, why did I have that expectation? Did I say I love you to that person just so they would say it back to me? Or did I say I love you to that person as a genuine expression of how I was feeling in the moment? When I thought about it, I realized I said it because it was a genuine expression of how I was feeling in the moment. It wasn't to get them to say, I love you to me. Now that I'm in recovery, I know that people love me through their actions. As one friend in recovery says all the time, love takes effort. So it's not necessarily from people telling me they love me. It's from showing me that makes me feel loved. When they do kind, loving things for me, which may include saying, I love you. But I would much rather have someone express their love to me genuinely because that's what they're feeling in the moment than have someone say, I love you just because they feel like they have to after I said it to them. Something came to mind as I was preparing for this podcast, and it's the idea of assumptions and how making assumptions is kind of the same thing as having an expectation. So here's another situation of where I was able to unhook from my expectation after the fact. I made an assumption in a work situation. I had assumed that simply because I was an employee of an organization, that I would automatically have access to some of the benefits of the customers of the organization. And when that didn't happen, I was terribly upset. I had to do some thought work on it, and I realized I wanted special treatment. I assumed that just by being an employee of the organization, that meant I got the benefits of the organization, and that was not the case. So I had an expectation of getting benefits that were not for me. And when I realized, oh, I was looking for special treatment, that meant I had an expectation. And I was then unable to unhook from the expectation. And that removed my resentment. It just melted. And let me tell you, I was pretty fucking resentful about that situation too. Here's another example that's relatively benign, but this is the kind of thing that used to send me reeling before recovery. And I am blessed to have learned to accept so many things that really used to just piss me off before recovery, like spilling something when I'm in a hurry. And now I just take it in stride and say things like, oops, there's that gravity at work again. Anyway, back to expectations. There's a neighborhood here in New Haven that is rather suburban, and there's a stoplight in that neighborhood that I go through at least weekly, and every time the light changes, there's a walk signal in between. And there's almost never any pedestrians at that intersection, mind you. Now, there are also stoplights in downtown New Haven where there are pedestrians galore that don't have a walk signal programmed each time the light changes. So every time I got to that stoplight and the walk signal came on, I'd get really annoyed. And when I finally realized how much of my serenity this was taking, I did some thought work on it, and I realized that I had an expectation that that light shouldn't be programmed that way. And I could either continue to be resentful about that every single time I got to that light, or I could let go of my expectation. I've heard it said that when I complain about things, that means I think that I know better than God does about how the world should work. So now when I get to that light, instead of expecting that there shouldn't be a walk signal, when I have to wait for the walk signal, I use it as an opportunity to make conscious contact with my higher power. I've let go of that expectation that there shouldn't be a walk signal. I hope these 3 examples of ways in which I've been able to unhook from expectations after the fact will be enough for you to be able to start implementing this idea for yourself, where you're able to get rid of expectations after the fact. Now, if you can work on lowering your expectations before the fact, definitely do that. Check out episode 31 if you need help with that. But if you're anything like me, you're still going to have expectations from time to time, and maybe you won't even realize it until they're not met. But as soon as you do realize, oh, that was an expectation, do the best you can to unhook from it, and that will let go of your resentment so you can be happy, joyous, and free. May it be so for you. Oh, and if you're interested in getting a replay and the slides from that boundaries webinar, send me an email to barb@higherpowercc.com. Peace. That's it for today. Please share this episode with anyone who might find it helpful. If you like what you've heard here, you might be interested in private coaching with me. If that sounds like you, then head on over to barbchat.net, or you can get on my calendar for a free 20-minute consultation to help you make lasting changes in your life, like I've made deep, lasting changes in my life. My ideal client is someone who is ripe for change, but I'll coach anyone who wants to be happy, joyous, and free. So if that's you, then go to barbchat.net and get on my calendar. I'd love to chat with you. Please like and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast outlet. This helps other people find me. Thanks for listening.